Cleopas the slow-burning pilgrim, a living encounter with the risen Christ. The character Cleopas appears only in Luke 24:13-35, as one of the two disciples of Jesus who, after the resurrection, were walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus. This passage takes place on the first day of the week resurrection, Sunday, which would forever change the course of human history. Points to note: Jerusalem was the religious and cultural metropolis of Judea, filled with political tension, ritual practice, and messianic expectation. Cleopas and his unnamed companion, though not fully introduced, expressed longing for rebuilding, understanding, and hope. Emmaus was a village located about 11 kilometers, 7 miles from Jerusalem. Likely today's Kubabi, where Jesus appears to them and reveals himself during a meal then vanishes. Thus, the context is post-cross despair, the absence of visible signs, and the resurrection proclaimed, but not yet fully understood. Who is Cleopas' identity and possibilities? The Gospel offers few biographical details. He is named in verse 18 simply as one of them, named Cleopas. Some points stand out. Greek name, possibly a diminutive of Cleopatros, or Cleopatros meaning glory of the Father, a name carrying honor and hope. A disciple with messianic expectations. He had been in Jerusalem, among the followers of Jesus, but not close enough to follow him to the end. Luke 24:18. This man was Jesus of Nazareth, witness of the evangelical resurrection. He hears the angelic reports, shares with his companion, and later recognizes Jesus alive. Luke 24:24-27. 30-31. Ancient traditions do not clearly identify him with other New Testament characters, though some speculate genealogical connections. None are confirmed by Scripture. The journey to Emmaus, between discouragement and seeking. As they walked, they were talking with each other. v14. The story begins with the conversation of the two disciples walking together. They recount the blow of the crucifixion, the stone rolled away, and the empty tomb. The women's announcement that Jesus had risen. They had expectations, but were confused. They saw shadows of the promise, but no form. Their hearts and eyes were burning along the way. The hidden presence of Jesus. Luke introduces a traveler who joins them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. This represents spiritual blindness in a new phase of history. The need for revelation and teaching to recognize the risen one. Jesus, in a pedagogical posture, asked what they were discussing, with patience and gentle diagnosis, inviting them to expose a faith that had become an uncertain hope. Teaching through the Scriptures. Christ as the fulfillment of all promise. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets. v27. Jesus reinterprets the Scriptures. Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. He reveals that his death and resurrection were part of God's plan from the beginning. He unpacked the eschatological meaning of the law, the prophets, and the Psalms, pointing to himself, not just as a messenger, but as the fullness of the message. This exegesis forms the foundation of Christian interpretation. Scripture points to Christ, and the believer's gaze must be refocused. The burning heart. As he teaches, the disciples feel a warm impression, spiritual revelation that awakens faith and hope. This experience became a reference point. Burning heart would later become a key phrase in biblical study and in the emotional and spiritual experience of Scripture. Recognition in the breaking of bread, the invitation to the house. They insist, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening." v29. This invitation is an act of hospitality. The shift from student-teacher to intimate companionship reveals that Jesus was more than a travel. He was the present Lord. The imminent revelation. At the moment Jesus took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them, their eyes are opened. He becomes recognizable as their true companion, then he vanishes again. This pattern symbolizes Jesus remains with us, but often in unexpected forms. He is revealed in fellowship and sacrament. The breaking of bread becomes a mirror of the gospel. The return to Jerusalem, testimony and urgency. Night rekindles the mission. There was no time to lose. They immediately returned to Jerusalem, now filled with enthusiasm, deeply moved, and ready to share. Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road? That same burning would later appear in small groups, gatherings, and devotionals as faith multiplied. Meeting with the other disciples. They find the 11 gathered v33, where they hear from Mary and other leaders about the resurrection. The report of the two added to the conviction. He truly rose. This communal revival strengthened apostolic faith, grounded in eyewitness testimony. Enduring lessons from the Cleopas episode. Faith interacting with doubt. Cleopas was not a skeptic. He had heard the signs, believed to some extent, but needed confirmation. Jesus brought meaning to his early-stage faith. This is a wake-up call to modern believers. Faith in Scripture must be met with lived experience and spiritual education that brings depth and existential clarity. Jesus manifests in company. Even when they didn't recognize him, Jesus remained beside the disciples. This reminds us, he walks with the believer through every path. Even if we don't recognize the signs, he is partially revealed along the way. Recognition comes through the broken bread. The sacrament and the act of shared meals are possible moments of revelation. The absent brother becomes present in that sacred common rite. It reminds us, sacrament is not merely symbolic, it is a revelation of real presence. Testimony is spontaneous and urgent. They returned in the dead of night because they had been transformed. Genuine testimony flows from a living encounter. Worldly testimony is that of the living martyr, visible, compassionate, participatory. This kind of witness brings change, resurrects discouragement, renews faith. Cleopas, as a spokesperson and faith multiplier. In the phrase, the one who was walking. Though summarized in Scripture, his words circulated among the disciples, becoming part of the church's collective memory, lending authenticity to apostolic narratives. In the emotional experience, the events at MOS became a framework for spiritual interpretation, a hermeneutic base. They also became a devotional reference for moments when we speak of a burning heart. Theological, ecclesial, and devotional impact. Cleopas's path gave rise to doctrine, the messianic nature of the Old Testament, the centrality of Easter as the defining event of the gospel, a synthesis of communion, liturgy, and sanctification. He is an inspiration, someone who fled, met an opening, and became pursued himself. A journey of seeking that led to an explosion of identity. Cleopas today, the living Bible in the pilgrimage of faith. Walking, reflecting. The journey of faith is itinerant, not a circle, but a trail with purpose. Personal paths become the communal form of a living church. Opening to the word with our feet. It is not enough to hear preaching from the pulpit. Faith also happens on the ground in everyday life, in encounters with others, in dialogue, in vulnerability. Recognizing presence in gestures and rituals. Jesus is still alive. He reveals himself at the table, in shared meals, in selfless service. Our faith must recognize his presence at home, in worship, and in our pursuit of justice. Conclusion. Cleopas, the disciple of the resurrection. This brief biblical account offers one of the most profound narratives of how Jesus is, as the communal Messiah, becomes the risen Christ within human history. Cleopas is the symbol of a spiritual manageable, emotional, transformed, and a relational missionary. His name, though rarely mentioned, echoes in the church through every heart that burns. A moving text that challenges us to walk, open the Scriptures, and break bread with Jesus. Cleopas is an invitation. A believer who had faith, encountered trauma, saw signs, returned with error but ended, filled with resurrection power in his heart. His story is the linear narrative of every disciple who, even without seeing, helps build the new community. If this inspiring story resonated with you, don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear about Cleopas. Turn on the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, and leave your like. We'll see you in the next video with more inspiring stories like this one.